I tell you something that just struck me there, only in the news bulletin, actually. And it means that we can begin going down a slightly different path from the B word, which is obviously back in the news with a vengeance at the moment. The fact that Priti Patel is shadow foreign secretary. I mean, where do you want to start with the levels of shock that are going on here? The first is, I think I heard her call somebody else smug this morning. That's a moment of magic. That's like an eclipse, right? That's like a solar eclipse. What is the ultimate? What's an irony? If Priti Patel can call somebody else smug, where does that leave the rest of us? Do we need a new word to describe her? I do not know. But of course, she's also been asked for her opinions on the situation in the Middle East, on Israel's continuing slaughter of Palestinian people. And nobody has mentioned it. And again, I don't know whether or not this is a criticism or whether or not it's just a reflection of the world that we've built since Brexit. Nobody mentions that she actually got fired from a Conservative government for having secret meetings with Israeli officials. So there's a really trustworthy, objective, unbiased person you can turn to answer questions about what's going on in Israel. Someone fired from the British government for breaking the ministerial code and having secret meetings with members of the Israeli government. I mean, who wouldn't trust her? Who wouldn't make her a dame? Who wouldn't put her back in the shadow cabinet? Do you see what I mean about the scale of what is broken? People like that, it'd be a bit of an exaggeration to say they should be in jail, but they should have been in a form of political purdah for the rest of their lives. So many of them, actually. Frost, you remember David Frost? He's back in the comment pages of the Telegraph today complaining that the Labour government haven't done enough to undo all of the mess that he made with his original treaty, with his original deal, as they called it, dancing around the room for weeks on end before hours, minutes, seconds on end before the reality of what they'd actually signed up for began to settle. We should do a sort of rogues gallery. I thought I'd done this in the context of my last book, but all of the people who haven't just sold the country down the river, but who have also been rewarded for it in ways that they really care about and value. Did Rees-Mogg get a knighthood? He must have got a knighthood, mustn't he? He must have got a knighthood. Rees-Mogg probably got a knighthood. Hannan's in the House of Lords. Priti Patel's a dame. Andrea Leadsome's a dame. The list is almost endless. Frost got put in the House of Lords. It is unconscionable that these people have been rewarded for their idiocy, incompetency, and I think in terms of patriotism at least, in terms of the national interest, treachery. And what's happened today is fascinating. And I mean that. I just need to acknowledge something before we continue. I am in danger today of becoming a turkey in favour of Christmas. I want to make that absolutely clear. I enjoy nothing more. Although yesterday's show started off a little bit soft, didn't it? A little bit, dazed almost. I have enjoyed nothing more over the last few years than explaining to you the reality that was being either completely ignored or completely misunderstood by almost every other corner of the UK media, including, of course, many beloved colleagues on this very radio station, some of whom were reduced to calling for you to stop talking about Brexit, which is a demonstration of ignorance on a scale that is visible from space for reasons that became crystal clear yesterday. It ain't over. It's never going to be over. But Keir Starmer has taken a punt on the febrile atmosphere that is so easily conjured up by Brexit being over. And I'd quite like him to be right, which makes me a turkey in favour of Christmas. I've shared with you, I think, recently the phrase that has become something of a refrain for me in recent years when people ask me about the news or people ask me how I deal with all the horrors unfolding at home and abroad. And I point out it's very good for business, but very bad for the soul. Beginning probably with Brexit, actually, or beginning with the coalition government. Very good for business, very bad for the soul. There's lots to talk about, there's lots to get angry about, there's lots to unpick and explain, there's lots of opportunities for us to actually dedicate ourselves to evidence and facts and expertise, while the age seems to be dedicated to promoting idiots and falsehoods and disinformation. But it's been very good for business. Yesterday was strange. Part of me hopes that yesterday was the last time that we have a show like that. I think I've been here before. Didn't we do a highlights at some point? Didn't we actually go back over some of the greatest calls? I think we did it to mark an anniversary. Someone should keep a record of all this stuff for posterity, Keith. We go back over, it must have been an anniversary And we went back over some of the deals. We should play back the comments and the speeches made by all the people that have been ennobled and promoted for their involvement in and loyalty to the massive lie. And, of course, in Boris Johnson's case, the massive arse-anist. We should be more cognizant of the catalogue of calumny and incompetence that we have not just endured in this country, but that we have been groomed and gaslit into actually promoting. And Keir Starmer has not bet the house, but he has expressed a fairly serious hope that things might be over, things might be changing. It's interesting for a whole bunch of reasons, not least because yesterday was the very first time that a UK government acknowledged the damage that has been done. This bizarre charade, this conspiracy of complicity that is part of Keir Starmer's Ming Vase mission, getting the Ming Vase across the ice rink. But, of course, for people on the other side of the argument, it was an epic exercise in dishonesty and disingenuousness, pretending that things hadn't gone badly. Yesterday was the first time that a British government acknowledged that Brexit has damaged Britain. The figures are pretty stark in terms of what we have exported from these islands to the European Union. You're down by 21%. That's a fifth. I don't know what you do for a living. Imagine if I came along and removed a fifth of your business or a fifth of your turnover right now. Just gone. Bang. 21%. It's gone. You'd be okay, I hope, but wouldn't be as good as you were yesterday. In imports, as in what we're bringing into this country, there's been a 7% drop, which makes life a lot harder for retailers and wholesalers, and also, of course, means that prices are likely to go up by a little bit. The hit to GDP, the overall hit to GDP, as estimated by the Office of Budget Responsibility, is I think, £5 billion a year. And no one has ever talked about this. I kind of understand why. And it's a little bit untrue to say nobody has ever talked about this, but just think what that would do. Just think that the money that would have been coming in if it hadn't been for these huge hits to imports and to exports and to other areas of commercial activity. 4%, forgive me, Britain's GDP today would be 4% higher. If you want to crunch the numbers, every percentage point of those four is worth £25.6 billion. £25.6 billion times four. And yet they're still trying to make you think that all we should really be caring about is fishing folk, whose situation today is identical to what it was last week, and whose situation last week was better than it was when we were in the European Union, and whose situation tomorrow, or when this deal finally gets inked, will be immeasurably better than it was yesterday, because they will now be able to sell what they catch to people who actually want what they catch, which in the case of most of the fish that is trawled from English waters is not the English, is not the British. The British don't want it, the fish that we catch. That was always the fundamental anomaly at the heart of the fishing conversation. So it's a funny one, right? Keir Starmer hopes things are over. Keir Starmer hopes the arguments are over. And various people responsible for this catastrophe seem to be dedicated to trying to keep the flames burning. It took me a minute to work that out. Do you know what it is? It's shame. Shame is such a massive driver of the human condition. And I know what I'm talking about because I was raised a Catholic. And Catholicism and guilt go together like a horse and carriage, like love and marriage. That shame is such a huge driver. Shame and projection. I heard some of Priti Patel's interviews as she toured studios this morning. I read some of Boris Johnson's extraordinary, what even would the word be? He returned to Daniel Hannan's imagery of gimp suits and ball gags. This is the United Kingdom. This is the land of Churchill and William Blake. You have a former Prime Minister and a man he put in the House of Lords, bringing the imagery of sadomasochistic sex parties to their attempt to analyse our political situation. Listen, I'm all for a giggle, and I would never indulge in kink-shaming, but what the fudge has happened to us? That a former Prime Minister, and he's not even the stupidest. Liz Truss, no doubt, is somewhere claiming that this is all some dismal betrayal of the thing that she was opposed to in the first place, but then suddenly was in favour of, and then got, monstered by a lettuce. That there it is. That bizarre notion that we've been so reduced as a country, our body politic, which is us, not the politicians, has been so abused and so poorly served that you've got a shadow foreign secretary opining upon the conduct of a government that she had secret meetings with in direct contravention of her own government's ministerial code. You've got a former prime minister and a half-wit he put in the House of Lords pontificating or deploying the imagery of sadomasochistic sex parties to describe Keir Starmer's largely successful attempts to undo the damage that they have done to our country. And you've got half of Fleet Street queuing up to tell unconscionable lies about what has actually been done. In no particular order. What do you think Asda, Morrison's, Marks and Spencer's, Octopus Energy, Salmon Scotland, BAE Systems, Vodafone, Dairy UK, the British Retail Consortium, Ryanair, Guide Dogs Campaigns, the Federation of Small Businesses, Confederation of British Industry, UK Hospitality, the Food and Drink Federation, the British Poultry Council, Babcock International Group, British Meat Processors Association and the British Chamber of Commerce have got in common? Just off the top of your head, what do you think they've got in common? Yeah, they're all positive. They've all got warm words to say about what was announced yesterday. On the other side, it's not unhinged headlines today. It's unhinged England. It's unhinged Britain. Kiss goodbye to Brexit, write the Daily Telegraph on their front page. Starmer's surrender, writes the Daily Mail. These newspapers still edited by men who have been catastrophically wrong about everything. As ever, the I paper manages to plough a reasonable furrow. Britain wins food and defence deals after fishing climb down with future clash on visas for under 30s. Because the people who claimed that they were perfectly comfortable with people coming here to work, it was just all the other ones they didn't like, are now perfectly uncomfortable with people coming here to work. The Daily Express, once again, is an exercise in imbecility. Keir's abject surrender is betrayal of Brexit Britain. They quote Nigel Farage on the front page, who is, I think, accepted from my analysis of shame, because, like Boris Johnson, I'm not sure he's capable of it. But here they go. The inability to admit a mistake creates a psychological circumstance in which you feel great anger, you feel great upset, but you can't direct it at the cause of your anger, because the cause of your anger is you. It's anger born of shame that you were involved in something so fundamentally damaging to the very fabric of our nation. Shame that you have essentially nurtured hatreds and divisions that will continue to bedevil this country for years, decades to come. Shame that all the things you told people would come to pass have not come to pass. And the real shame, because I don't buy the conspiracy theories about really rich tax avoiders and the rest of it, it's much, much simpler than that. The real shame comes from the knowledge that you didn't put the effort into understanding any of the things that you've built your career on. You didn't put any effort at all into simply understanding things like the Dublin Agreement or regulatory alignment in Northern Ireland, or the Good Friday Agreement, or the power of trade. Do you remember Dominic Raab admitting he'd never clocked how much trade goes on between Calais and Dover? So you've bought this chocolate box. That's not quite the right image. You've bought this weird fetishized image of the United Kingdom. That poor fellow yesterday wants to go back to the 1950s. You bought this mad image. It's interesting how many key Brexiters were brought up abroad in the kind of post-empire miasma. And they had this mad idea that we could do this and we could do that. And because the feelings were so intense, because the emotional heft of Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, lifted you so high that looking down to actually focus on facts and work out what was going on felt wrong, unnecessary. It's the shame of knowing that you got on this horse because you hadn't done any due diligence. You hadn't made any effort to understand. Somebody popped up and said, I think you might be wrong about this. What did you do? You shouted, Project Fear! Project Fear! Sit down! Project Fear, Brussels! You didn't do anything. They made no effort. The editor of the Telegraph, the editor of the Mail, the editor of the Sun, the editor of the Express, all of them, and now the editor of the Times, formerly an editor of the Telegraph and formerly an editor of the Sun. The same bloke. That's how Rupert Murdoch's empire works. That's how Brexit Britain works. Didn't do any due diligence, made no effort at all to understand the most simple of concepts, because whatever you want to call it, bigotry, jingoism, xenophobia, racism, post-imperial idealization, whatever you want to call it, and you can choose the most generous phrase you please, whatever you want to call it, it somehow allowed you to turn off your brain. I don't have to think about this stuff because I'm English. I don't have to think about this stuff because we need them more than they need us more than we need them. I don't have to think about this stuff because the morning after Brexit, the Germans will be queuing up to do bit. I don't have to think about this stuff because Britannia rules the waves. I don't have to think about this stuff because 2 world wars and 1 World Cup. I don't have to think about this stuff because I'm an Englishman and someone who is born English has won the lottery. I don't have to think about any of this stuff because I'm just right. I know I'm right. We're exceptional. We're extraordinary. We're English. And I say English advisedly. There's a little bit of this in the Brits, but it's mostly English, right? I'm the hard man of Brexit, Stephen Baker. I don't need to worry about understanding things. I'm Dominic Raab. I don't need to know about trade between Calais and Dover when I become Brexit Secretary. I'm Priti Patel. I'm a genius, and everyone else is smug. The refusal, the failure to just do your homework, to just have a cursory understanding of what was actually going on, is a source of such unbelievable shame for these people. You can sometimes see it in their eyes when they appear on television. And of course, the big cheeses don't. They send out their little patsies, their little lick spittles to do the studio tours. The big cheeses you'll never see. You'll never see Viscount Rothermere or Paul Dacre or Ted Verity, the Holy Trinity at the Daily Mail. You'll never see Tony Gallagher from the Times. You'll never see whoever edits the Telegraph this week. You'll never see the editor of the Sun. Oh, you might occasionally. She'll go on the BBC to get her toes tickled by Laura Koonsberg. But you won't ever see these people actually taking account or taking responsibility for what they've done to this country. They'll send out well-paid patsies to do that for them. And sometimes you see the shame. You see the shame that it's not so much that they were wrong, it's that they were wrong because of who they are and what they did. They were wrong because of their arrogant belief that they didn't need to do the hard yards, they didn't need to do the digging, they didn't need to do the detail, they didn't need to do the work. The patron saint, probably David Frost, because he actually ended up writing the deal, negotiating it, despite a year previously being the representative of the Scotch Whisky Association who was passionately opposed to Brexit. So the lies, the failure to study, the producers looking at me because this monologue is now moving into record-breaking territory, but most of all the shame of it. And that's why they're so angry, and that's why they're so unhinged, and that is why they're still so dangerous.